Welcome back to Hard Ticket to Halloween. I am Jeffrey Bogus.
And I am Tristan Moore.
And we have a special guest joining us today on our horror movie marathon.
Yeah, Aaron Radcliff. And let me tell you, I am excited to be here. The ticket, that ain't the only thing that's hard, let me tell you.
Oh, good.
I'm so
That's a
happy to be
strong
here.
start, Aaron. It's a very strong start.
Assert dominance in the podcast arena.
There we go. Aaron is joining us from Head on a Stick, which is a podcast that specializes specifically in horror movies.
Yeah, I believe last week you had my co-host Jeffrey Scott on.
We did.
And now we're here to kind of round out the duo, continuing the, I believe I referred to us as the Jimmy-Timmy Power Hour.
You did. You did that on my guest appearance in your podcast. So we've got a full-on crossover going on this month. And I believe this episode that you're listening to right now is dropping the same day as the Head on a Stick Texas Chainsaw Massacre episode, as a part of y'all's Slashix month.
Yeah. We're going through like a lot of the classic slashers this month. And yeah, as far as I know, is with the release dates going, yeah, they should all both be coming out on the same day. Unfortunately, Tristan's still kind of in the cuck chair as far as the podcasts are going, but we're trying to get something squared away for you to be able to show up on too.
I've never been in the cuck chair before.
Wow.
How's it
feel?
Wow, this is what it feels like.
I wanted to talk about Skinamarink on your guys' podcast, but I heard, Aaron, that you're like you hate Skinamarink.
Look, I'm willing to do an episode on it, but yeah, I did not like Skinamarink at all. I was
that's
so
totally
bored.
Well, fortunately, I believe we all like today's matchup that we'll be talking about. So let's go ahead and get the movie podcast comparison game, whatever you call this thing, started with option number A. So, Aaron, I'm going to toss this one over to you. Introduce us to the first film.
All right, option number A, The Descent, directed by Neil Marshall. After Sarah loses her husband and daughter in a horrific traffic accident at the beginning of the movie, she and her friends decide to go on a spelunking expedition in North Carolina. That already sounds scary enough if you know anything about like cave diving and whatnot. But what is scarier, the actual cave diving or the freakish humanoid monsters that are found underneath? And can they survive their descent?
Descent. Yes, this is a horror movie that came out in the UK in 2005. It had a wide release before hitting American theaters a little over a year later in 2006. It's written and directed by Neil Marshall. I don't really know anything else by him.
The movie he did before this was probably the only other good movie he did, which was Dog Soldiers.
Okay.
He did that Hellboy remake a couple years ago with David Harbour.
Oh.
Yeah, that Abomination.
Oh, no.
And he's done a couple other like lower budget things, but yeah, like Dog Soldiers and The Descent are like really his big things.
Okay. And we are going to be putting that movie up against option number B. Tristan, why don't you take that one away for us?
Yeah, option number B is a 2022 horror film called Barbarian, directed by Zach Cregger, who has recently made waves with his 2025 horror film Weapons. Mm-hmm. Big deal. It stars Georgina Campbell, Justin Long, Bill Skarsgård, Richard Brake. It's about a woman who goes to Detroit. She stays at an Airbnb only to find out that the Airbnb has also been booked by another person, a man. And she has to decide, is she going to stay with this man? And she does. They hit it off. But it's not long before they find out that they're not alone in the Airbnb. Airbnb.
Now, there's something creeping and crawling underneath them in the basement, which is sort of where I think the crux of our comparison comes from.
Yeah. I proposed this matchup, but we knew we wanted to talk about The Descent because, Aaron, this is your favorite horror film.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
There's like a couple movies. We were talking off air before we recorded. There's like a couple that kind of alternate, but I feel like if I have to pick one, it would be The Descent. I absolutely love it. Because it's just one of those movies that, like, it could have entirely just been a movie about these women being trapped in a cave, and that would already be freaky enough because Neil Marshall does such a great job of making this, really tight, claustrophobic, breathless atmosphere. And then he just, like, cranks it up to 11 when, like we said, these humanoid creatures I believe he referred to them as, like, cavemen who never left the cave and just, like, evolved to be, like, albino bat-like people.
Right.
That just like immediately takes from just this freaky real life situation to an awesome, fun creature feature.
Oh yeah, reject modernity, embrace the cave.
I believe it was Clint Gage on Cinefix who described it as the terrain being as hostile as the creatures they encounter. And they don't encounter them until like over 50 minutes into the movie. And this is a tight, like it's less than an hour 30, I believe, just under.
Yeah.
And so you're waiting a while for these ghouls to show up. Same with Barbarian. Barbarian kind of has like 3 separate parts to it. And the first third is spent in this Airbnb getting to know these 2 characters before we're introduced to its subterranean dweller, which is a mutant.
It's a mommy.
Yeah, it's the mother. It's like a 9 foot tall, freakishly strong mutant incest baby, child of rape by the original owner of the property, who, spoilers, is still down there too. It's just kind of like a matter of like what is underneath this seemingly, just normal everyday building. And so that's one of the subterranean horror angle is, I think, the main combination here between these 2 movies. Tristan, what else do you kind of think of whenever you think of Barbarian and The Descent in conversation with one another?
Well, yeah, there's the subterranean horror aspect of it. There's also kind of like a midpoint turn in both these films. I think it comes a little bit earlier in Barbarian, like you're saying, but like you think it's going to be a certain type of movie until it turns into an even more oh shit of a situation for the characters. I think there's also an underlying theme of trauma, which ties into a kind of bigger point that and you, Jeff, you and I have been talking over the course of this month about like where horror has been and where it's going. And there's this big meme, right, that, right now horror, or at least in the past like 10 years, A24 horror, the monster is trauma. It's all about dealing with trauma.
Yeah.
And my contention is I think that The Descent kind of, for me, it kind of starts a trend kind of early on. It kind of gets on the train early. It's about trauma. It's I wouldn't call it, as elevated horror. There's something like, The Witch or The Babadook or anything. But I do think it kind of prefigures a lot of like the elevated horror trend of the 2010s. And I think Barbarian is kind of transitioning a little bit out of that trend. It's kind of it's doing its own thing.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comparison. So like The Descent almost like is before the start of the elevated horror. I think a lot of people cite, and we talked about this in last week's episode, they'll turn to The Babadook to kind of be like, this is where
it started.
This is where it starts. And then by the time, like even this year, we had Bring Her Back, and the year before we had Talk to Me. We're like coming out of it. Those movies, like they were well received, but I don't think they got the fanfare that something like Hereditary, which was like right in that sweet spot.
Oh yeah, it's almost like the MCU of horror films. Is what A24 had there for a little bit, and now it's kind of transitioning out. And yeah, I just think that's an interesting thing to take note of, and I'm curious if you all happen to agree with that trend. And I guess that's something that we'll kind of find out as we discuss.
Yeah.
I've always kind of pushed back on the whole concept of elevated horror. This idea, I mean, like there was definitely like an increase in this kind of like, quote unquote, the monster is trauma thing. But I mean, especially if you watch horror movies, like a lot of horror movies, not just from like the 2010s or the 2000s, but before, it's like, you people always kind of like push back like, oh, like not all art is political or yada yada. I was like, no, all art is political.
Yeah.
All horror is political. And like you can find a lot of these things, these same things, whether it's trauma or like what we talked about in our Texas Chainsaw episode, kind of like the struggles of like people being left behind in the chase of modernity,
right,
and everything. You find these things across all different, subgenres of horror. And I think what really caused the creation of that elevated horror term is because it's no longer typically, creature features or a slasher. It's somebody, it's kind of this turn towards more psychological horror and using these kind of quote unquote art house approaches.
Yeah.
And it makes people, it's kind of why people were really receptive to the idea of Get Out being nominated for Best Picture, but they didn't necessarily want to go so far as to call it a horror movie because it's like, oh, it didn't do X, Y, and Z. It's like, no, it's, there's like, yeah, sure, there's no person running around with a chainsaw, or there's no like, Godzilla monster or whatever going on, but like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, horror has a certain connotation, and I think that can be negative, especially for people who are like in the industry and everything. So I definitely agree there. I think part of like the elevated horror thing is like a branding exercise.
That too. Yeah, like especially like A24. I mean, like everybody talks about like the A24 vibes,
Yes,
or whatever. Not just with their horror movies, but I mean like in general. But yeah, there's like a stylistic choice. It's like, yeah, we have a specific vibe that we want to go with, or a specific, thing that we want to go with, and we just happen to be really successful at marketing it and getting this out to wider audiences.
Yeah.
And so it kind of paints this skewed perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I think the perspective is skewed for sure. When I'm talking about these trends, I am talking about it more from the sense of like a commercial aspect and sort of a perceived aspect. I 100% agree with you. I think horror films, you go back, a century, and they have rich themes in them worth digging into. I think horror was maybe in kind of a low place in the 2000s. Like that tends to be like my least favorite decade of horror. I think The Descent kind of stands out as one of the best. But I do think that you're right. Not trying to poo-poo actual horror, horror that came beforehand. It's definitely elevated in like a thematic sense.
And so I'm curious, Aaron, when, you hold The Descent in such high esteem, but it also like kind of predates some of these trends. Like, what do you think The Descent does differently? One, in context with a lot of the trauma is the horror later movies, but also in conversation with Barbarian, who has like, which has shades of that, but there's definitely probably more going on. It doesn't want you to get hung up on that one specific thing.
So for me, one of the big driving things that just even outside of kind of like anything thematically speaking, like I'm not claustrophobic, but just like the idea of like cave diving, like freaks me out, like the Nutty Putty Cave type stuff. So I think the fact that it already kind of hits on some of these primal kind of fears that people have. But then also, I think it just does a really good job of showing like the complexity of like how people react to like the traumas that have influenced them. Like Sarah, she was a mother, and even throughout the movie, she's still struggling to kind of, be able to move on, but she's also still acting motherly towards some of the other members of the group.
Yeah.
Juno, she's, very secretive and everything, and just trying to like, keep things for herself. And then after I don't necessarily want to get into like all the spoilers too early, but like you find out that, some of her actions seem to be based on this idea of like, oh, I could die anytime, basically. So I want to be able to kind of do this stuff now. And I think it just did it. And I think also for me, I just watched it at like a younger age. And so I was like, I don't know, 16 16 when I watched that. And I think it just kind of was able to solidify itself for me. And so I was a lot more open to these later movies being a lot more maybe kind of slower or more kind of hard focused on, maybe, these different, thematic elements that maybe for people nowadays who have maybe, been growing up with that being kind of, as you referred to it, like the MCU of horror, get kind of, wrung out on.
Yeah, I know you had some trauma points you kind of wanted to draw parallels with as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, in the Descent, I feel like the trauma is very like obvious, right? Like at the beginning of the film, Sarah loses her daughter and her husband in a car crash. And a year later, she goes on the spelunking trip, and it's kind of like implied to be like her first big outing since then. It's kind of her like kind of trying to get back into the swing of things. And as the film progresses, she, like at one point she's like trying to crawl through a really tight space, and she freaks out and she has to be talked out of it and everything. So there's like all these, she panics still. She's taking like medicine to like kind of cope with her feelings and everything. And then eventually, all shit hits the fan when the crawlers show up, and she has to deal with those. And so the film, is literally a descent into caverns, and which has all kinds of symbolic imagery there. And she has to try to overcome all that struggle. And at the end, she kind of becomes, I don't want to say like a girl boss, but she kind of becomes like she becomes like a final girl covered in blood, and she's like killing all these crawlers. She even literally kills like a crawler family. Like it murders a child, basically, which I feel like it is very, has to be super meaningful for her.
Yeah.
So you have that theme going there, and then there's kind of I don't want to say like a similar theme of motherhood in Barbarian, although the mother is sort of like the monster of Barbarian. But there's also a theme of like an intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
Not just because the mother is the product of abuse and incest, but also the setting of Barbarian. And even the title itself. See, the So the Airbnb takes place on
Barbary Lane.
Street,
Barbary,
right? So
yeah.
anybody who lives there is a barbarian, right?
Did you catch that?
Did you catch that? They're in the suburbs of Detroit, and they like the main character Tess shows up and then wakes up in the morning and gets to see the neighborhood in like the broad daylight, and it's maybe even scarier in the daylight than it is at night because it is completely trashed, completely run down. It's been completely abandoned, and so there's a trauma of like capital flight, which is something that you and I talked about during our Deliverance episode. So there's this like capital trauma too that I feel like is important, and so that's it. I mean, like I really feel like those two elements there's something there.
I think definitely, and it bleeds into the way that the movies are structured too. Because you say there's like a midpoint in the Descent.
Right.
To me, the Descent is like a big crescendo. It definitely like she does descend kind of into madness by the end of it, and she has brought herself past this point of like redeemability as she becomes this thing that has been overtaken by her trauma. It's manifested into the slaughter of these crawlers, fight or flight, versus Barbarian, where if we're dealing with that like generational trauma, it's very segmented. It's got 3 clean parts almost.
Yeah, for me, Barbarian is like an uncovering of, and I sent you guys some notes beforehand. It's an uncovering of barbarity, right? You start the movie with Tess, and she walks into this Airbnb, and there's one of the Scars guards.
Which is just like, okay, as a postmodern horror movie, just including Bill Skarsgård is he the bad guy? Isn't he the bad guy?
Is he Pennywise?
yeah, it's just like on a meta sense. Yes. It is already just like, that's kind of brilliant.
Oh yeah, and already the setup, it's a horror film, so you already are like weary of this guy because you're like, what if he's, a murderer or whatever? Yeah. So you're already built up to be suspicious of this guy. And then as time goes on, you figure out that he's actually a good guy. He's a nice guy. And right when you realize that, he gets his head bashed in by the mother. And there's your monster there. And then we kind of cut back to Justin Long's character, AJ, who's this like really slimy Hollywood producer who just got Me Too'd.
Like in the process of getting Me Too.
He's in the process of getting Me Too'd. A Hollywood Reporter article is about to come out releasing some scandalous details. And you find out that he is just like awful. Like at first you're like, well, maybe you like maybe give him the benefit of the doubt. You're like, maybe he didn't do anything. And then you find out, this guy's definitely a rapist. And then he becomes the monster. And then they also humanize the mother in the process. You find out that she's a victim of something else, that she just wants something to mother. And then you uncover that the real kind of monster behind her is Richard Brake, who is still in the basement, and he's just like sleeping. He's just been there forever, I guess, in the past like 40 years. So there is an uncovering of trauma in kind of a similar way where you're talking about like an ascent or a crescendo. In the Descent, I feel like you have almost a crescendo of peeling back layers in Barbarian. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Blue Velvet in that way. Yeah,
it is. And I that's a good transition into a point I really wanted to make about like the difference one of the key differences I find between these two movies is that The Descent is really diving headfirst into the horror of the unknown, the uncharted cave, which, as they're exploring this cave, they find remnants of spelunking gear, so somebody has been there before. Dumb Neanderthals didn't know how to use it. But somebody's been there before, but they're going further and further away from civilization. Whereas everything in Barbarian is happening right below the surface. There is a neighborhood up there. It's not the best neighborhood. It's past its prime. We get to see it in its prime because, like you said, we're peeling back these layers. But it's that like the horror just underneath the known, where as they continue to uncover the secrets of this Barbarian house, they're discovering just like what was festering under the surface versus The Descent, which is bringing these things, these primal things in survival mode out of our heroines. And they're full front and center. Like they're not hiding anymore. They're on full display. And I think that's a really clever contrast between the two of these movies.
Yeah, I agree. Especially one thing that I noticed, especially when I was rewatching Barbarian, because it was the first time that I watched it since it was in theaters, was not only, as you mentioned, there's this kind of just depravity and horror that's kind of just below the surface, but there's also some of it that is above the surface, but it's kind of disguised in a way. And the way I saw it was with the cops.
Oh,
You know,
Oh,
being where
yeah.
they just like completely ignore Tess because you're like, she's like, you know, like, no, like there's a dude who's trapped in this house. You need to come help. He's like, oh, you know, you're just a druggie.
Oh, yeah.
And so like,
Yeah.
there are these horrors that can happen just underneath, but are they always there, or are they allowed to happen because of outside societal, you know, structures
Yeah.
that, you know, allow these, you know, versus like, you know, I mean, you're not going to get mad per se at a wolf for attacking you and eating your leg because, you know, it's a wolf. It's what it does. But you could get mad at this dude's Rottweiler for biting your leg because he beat the shit out of the Rottweiler and the cops didn't do anything to.
Yeah, it's
Take
an
it away.
institutional failure. Yeah, exactly.
There's going to be a story tomorrow in the Hollywood Reporter about this.
About what? About me? Are you kidding?
The allegations are very serious.
Yo, what's she saying I did? Is she saying I raped her or something?
Hey, Jay, why don't you just calm down?
No,
Okay.
what the f*** is she saying?
Yes, she's saying that you raped her.
I wrote down that that the Descent is a don't get attached movie, whereas Barbarian is like I can't even get attached to this guy movie because he's
Oh,
a
yeah.
piece of shit.
Yeah.
There's another element too where like I'll backpedal a little bit to like the context in which these movies came out, and I'll kind of get into Zach Cregger's career a little bit because, you know, he's known, or he was originally known for the sketch comedy group, The Whitest Kids You Know.
Right.
Love Whitest Kids United.
They got big in what, like late 2000s, early 2010s, probably. I think Zach Cregger credited as the director for Miss March.
Co-writer, co-director, along with Trevor Moore.
Yeah, which is just awful. Like everybody agrees it's like just one of the worst movies of the century, probably. And it's
It
his
wasn't
last.
that bad.
Well, okay, I didn't see it, but
One of the worst movies.
But also, I was a
You haven't
teenager when
seen
I watched
it?
it, so
I've seen enough clips from it to know what it is. You know, and like this is his last credit before Barbarian. But you know, he gets big on the internet, like a lot of celebrities have now, a lot of creators in the celebrity space. And there's like, we talked about it in our past couple episodes, that like analog horror, just a little bit, where like the Backrooms movie's coming out. And I think a movie like Barbarian is kind of making room for it again, because Cregger got big during the time when analog was taking off. Your Slender Man, your creepypasta, all that stuff. And then you watch Barbarian, and some of the scares, before anything even happens, just come from uncovering doors after hallways, after stairs. Like when Tess discovers the initial room, like with the bed and the camera, it's disturbing.
Right.
And then they discover the room after that.
Yeah.
And it's just pitch black. There's nothing except for the faint holler of Keith's voice as he's like, "Help me!" And it's like terrifying. And she is screaming. And
Yes.
she's still like in safety, but she's screaming into the void because
Yeah.
she's like, this is just psychologically
She's
like,
barely containing herself.
it's horrifying. Like,
Yeah.
you got to be a hell of a hero to go down there and investigate. But she does. And she finds him, and he crawls onto the ground out of the darkness. That's an effective jump scare,
Oh,
I
yeah.
will say. And it's just a matter of like, when they're in this basement and there's barely any light, you can barely make out things at the end of the dark hallway. You barely make out the silhouette of the mother
Yes.
as she like won't go near the door where Frank is. That's like straight out of the 2000s.
Oh,
that
yeah.
that image that's like grainy. This thing showed up on my night camera and
Oh,
I don't
yeah,
know what it is.
yeah.
It's like that kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. Like the thin, long-armed, pale, naked form.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is such like a creepypasta thing. There's even like that aesthetic, that like 80s aesthetic with like the television in the room, like with the soft kind of violet light and everything. Like it's hearkening, it's kind of like parodying that nostalgia in a way too.
And to me, it's showing that there's still a place for it. Like the response to Barbarian, it was a little divisive, but a lot of people really, really liked this movie and were praising it. And I think that's just, there's probably a lot of people who grew up with that idea of horror, that it still exists. Nobody is really doing it or was doing it when Barbarian came out, because we were like, you know, we were coming off the heels of that elevated horror trend. But no, those images, the power of that like filmmaking style is very much still there.
It's thriller, almost vibes-based horror. Almost vibes-based.
And you know what I remember more from The Descent than the shots? The color.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
The color palette. Oh my God. It's so just like you didn't change your white balance for the beginning of it. It's like this gross blue. Everything is like just all of the trees are blue. All of the anything that's outside on the surface is blue. When Sarah wakes up in the hospital before they go on the spelunking trip, it's that gross green.
Oh, yeah.
And then they go into the tunnels and everything's like that kind of like middling yellow, like we don't know what's gonna happen exactly. We're kind of in a liminal space right now.
Right.
And then when shit hits the fan, it's red.
And green, yeah.
Red, color of the flares. And you know how she finds the exit is because there's blue light flooding in.
Yeah. Which you were like never wanted to see that ugly ass daylight so much as at the end of The Descent.
Yeah. How did you guys feel about that? Did that make the movie feel dated at all to you?
No, not to me. To me, it made it. I always thought it was kind of like this intentional choice because I mean, like, it kind of helps set up an atmosphere of like this kind of gloomy, just setting anyway. But also, especially like when they're outside, it feels, that very wet, very blue gray feels very kind of melancholic. Like it was supposed to be like this happy get together. Like, I don't know if this was a movie that was made, in the last couple of years. I feel like it would have had a more kind of midsummer approach where it's like, oh, it's a nice, lovely day, and we're going to go out and do this. But I feel like it kind of reflects the melancholic feelings that Sarah is going through. And then, as you said, as they get further and further down, it starts getting darker. You have the red flares, and then eventually there are some shots where like you literally see smoke coming up from the flare, so it literally looks like Dante going into hell.
Oh yeah,
and everything. So I always felt that there was kind of like an intentionally done thing. I didn't feel like it really dated it to me personally.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely intentional. I believe that it's audacious in that reason. You don't see a lot of horror movies now. Like if they're doing it, it's probably just they feel kind of grungy. They're not like draping themselves so overtly in that kind of color palette. Something like Tucker and Dale, which is doing it to connote a feeling of like Wrong Turn, which does it maybe accidentally, but probably just didn't have the budget to shoot very well to begin with.
I was getting Tucker and Dale and Wrong Turn flashbacks with the opening of The Descent because they say they're in the Appalachian Mountains. And
there's banjo music.
And it almost looks like Canada, but I know they didn't actually film in Canada. But
why? We're back in the Appalachian woods where everything's trying to kill you.
Yeah.
Like it's always just.
At least they're not banjo playing like crawlers. Cavemen. Can you imagine?
Yeah, they're blind, but they know how to finger the banjos in the dark.
Yeah.
Now, can I ask you something? Did you guys have trouble actually making out what was happening on screen? Because that's a complaint that I've seen a lot of people throw at The Descent, and I personally have never had that problem. I'm not somebody who has my brightness level jacked up on my TV. Whatever it comes out of the box as is what it is.
Yeah.
And so I was always like, even with the lights on, I was like, I can see everything perfectly fine. But apparently that's a complaint that I've seen a lot. So I was just kind of curious if you guys had an issue with that.
Yeah, I have trouble seeing what's happening in The Descent. Okay. It's not awful. Like, I feel like it's like part of the effect. I mean, like, The Descent is like all disorientation. Like, the more they go into the cave, the more like the frame seems to tighten around them, like the cave walls and everything and all the colors. So like the fast like cuts and editing, it doesn't bother me, but it is disorienting. I mean, I think that's the effect on me anyways.
I was bothered a little bit by it, if I'm being honest. One, the blacks are pitch black in this movie too. Like they really crushed the blacks and the color. But then like two, the quick cuts as well. Like there's such a cool creature design. I wish we got like a little bit more of just lingering on it because they do lose the sense of space. I even made a note at the very beginning when they're whitewater rafting that like there were enough cuts and then cuts back to wide angles to close-ups that I was like, it's fast, it's frenetic, but I still get a sense of where they are. Yeah. And in The Descent, like, intentional or not, I lose that. And, it probably is an intentional choice. It's not my, like, preferred way to watch action or horror action either, frankly.
Yeah, you could do, like, an old boy thing where, like, in, like, a hallway, quote-unquote, of the cave while the crawlers are coming at them and they're just, like, fighting them.
I mean, definitely, like, I think it's when Juno kills the first crawler. Like that entire thing, is just like, it's almost like that one scene in, was it Taken 3, where there's like all these different cuts while the action is happening. But at least she's like, it feels like this thing is literally on top of you and you have no idea what's going on. You're literally just kind of flailing to get it off of you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it works, but I definitely can see why that kind of, messes with people.
Well, it makes a good contrast with Barbarian because Barbarian doesn't crush the blacks as harshly, and you can faintly make out just like in the grain a shape of something, and it's like the polar opposite kind of what the Descent is doing, where it'll shine a flashlight on it and it'll move out of the light.
Yeah.
That's an effective scare versus like just barely being able to make out something that's moving towards you. That's also an effective scare.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It either lingers or you lose track of it.
Now, if you don't mind me, going back maybe a handful of minutes, just because I was curious, because you mentioned, some of the things that were making this effective, but I want to point out some of the well-received movies of the last couple of years, or even stuff that's like upcoming. And I kind of want, your guys' thought on it. So like upcoming, like obviously they're making like the Backrooms movie here in like a couple weeks. There's Shelby Oaks, which is that Chris Stuckman movie. But then you have, Get Out, which was made by Jordan Peele, who was on a comedy show.
Yeah, another comedian turned prolific horror director.
You have, Barbarian and Weapons, Zach Cregger, Whitest Kids You Know. You mentioned earlier, Talk to Me and Bring Her Back, the Philippou brothers, YouTube comedy YouTubers. And you mentioned specifically the scene where like the mother shows up and she takes Bill Skarsgård's head and like bashes it against the wall.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first watched it, it was at a screening with the rest of the crew, because I worked part-time at a movie theater, and everybody freaked out. But then like immediately, like the mother like screams at Tess, and then we hard cut to this happy music. It's very silly. I purposely, during the entire run, I would time out and between cleans to go in and watch the people's reaction to see not only them freak out, but to see how many of them laughed at the immediate cutback.
Yeah.
And people have always said that, horror and comedy, are bedfellows. And I wonder how much more these scares are elevated by having people who have a background in comedy that are able to kind of hit that. Because I mean, like, I love Martyrs, I love funny games. There's not really much levity in those compared to like the other movies that I mentioned, and I feel like that really also kind of helps balance and elevate some of the scares beyond just kind of the technical aspects with which it's filmed.
Yeah, I think it definitely elevates the scares. Like the timing is definitely there, especially in Cregger's films. It also, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword, because I think Cregger goes for the thrills. He goes for pleasing the audience. And I think he loses track a little bit of the ideas that he's pulling on. That can be an issue for some people. It's kind of an issue for me with Weapons. It's an issue for me with Barbarian. But for some people who are just kind of seeking like raw thrills, who aren't as concerned about like what's kind of going on under the surface, no pun intended.
Oh man, that was good.
That was completely unintentional. I think it is effective. Yeah, Jeff, what do you think?
Well, I think, you can go in the opposite direction where a movie is so caught up in what it wants to say that it turns into a message movie.
Yeah.
I don't think The Descent is like a message movie.
No.
It definitely wears its like it's more like singular in tone than something like Barbarian, which is, I think, having a lot of fun, playing with a lot of things. We're going to talk in our next episode about movies that just kind of invite you to interpret as you want from them. And I think Barbarian kind of does that. There are things that are on the surface, and I think there are things that are that transcend just surface level things. What do you call that? Subterranean? I don't know. See, I can't do it like you, man. That was brilliant. But like in Barbarian, there's the theme of the Me Too movement, and it was fresher then 3 years ago than it is now. But I remember some people being kind of confused why it becomes about that. And then you start to realize that all of the men, everybody around Tess just like doesn't understand the effect that like the presence of a man or what a man's actions against a woman or around a woman, like they just can't understand. Even nice guy Keith like is awkward and has these expectations that he's still translating and like being pushy about in subtler ways than somebody like AJ, who's literally a rapist. And Tess is the only one to survive. Like she goes through the trauma of the experience And you can definitely pull on that thread if you want to. And you can pull on like the gentrification thread if you want to, like, you know, or the opposite, when the neighborhood deteriorates and leaves people behind, leaves Frank in the basement. There's a lot of threads you can pull on with Barbarian. And I don't think that like any of them are less like rich because that they're existing side by side. Barbarian, at the end of the day, because it's made by a guy who's like, you know, he comes from that comedy background. Like, he really knows kind of the stuff that he wants to play with.
Yeah.
And he's playing with a lot of the boogeyman stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of it kind of feels like a little more prototypical than something like Weapons, which is directly segmented by chapter.
Right.
But it definitely just feels like bringing a lot of elements together and putting them into a story that almost feels like, it feels like almost like a story you would tell around like a campfire. You're trying to pull in some really modern fears and anxieties with like Airbnb and be like, and there was a creature in the basement. It almost feels like a creepypasta, honestly.
Yeah, it's almost like one of those word maps, and they just put it up and he has some darts and he's kind of throwing them at the word map. And he's like, oh, there's a theme right there. Let me pull it out and pull in that thread and kind of mad lib it into the story, which, you know, I agree. It doesn't lessen the richness of the themes, but I do think it makes the work less singular. And it makes those themes stand out less, especially next to something like The Descent, which is super singular, like you said earlier. It's very obvious what The Descent is going for. It is anchored by its main character and her dynamic with Juno, who ends up being something of an antagonist. And I don't think that I think Barbarian is just a little more uneven because it doesn't commit to a certain idea that it wants to explore. It's sort of like the rope in the wall that they pull to open the door into the chamber. Like that's Zach Cregger's like writing process. He's like, here's a little thread, I'm going to pull on it and maybe I'll go down and explore, but maybe I'll just kind of linger in the basement. And, you know, so that's my only complaint. What do you think about that, Aaron?
I definitely see that. I would say if there's one kind of thing that that Barbarian specifically does kind of keep through is it's this line that Tess says when she's talking to Keith, and it's something to the effect of she's like, oh, if the roles were reversed and you were at the door and I opened up, would I let you in? He's like, no, I wouldn't let you in.
Right.
He's like, you know, men don't really typically have to think about all these other crazy things, or they're able to go a little more headlong into something and not worry about the consequences. And I mean, that's what happens with Keith. He's like, oh, I'm going to go down to the basement anyway. And then obviously off screen, he comes across like the stairwell down. He could have stopped, but he kept going.
Like most rational people would.
Yeah. Justin Long's character could maybe, you know, follow his lawyer's advice and not call the woman he allegedly raped, but he does.
He does.
You know, the consequences be damned. And then, you know, whatever may have been going on with the father. And of course, that results in all of them getting killed. Even the homeless guy is like, oh, I've been living on this street 15 years. That bitch never came in. Literally, as soon as the sentence ends, she busts in, hilariously rips his arm off and beats him to death with it.
Yeah, there's a comedic horror beat right there.
But yeah, it's like literally every man in the movie showcases some variation of like, yeah, men don't really have, you know, maybe not like concern about the world around them, but they don't have to feel as concerned as a woman does.
Yeah, I think she says men can go around. They have the liberty to go around and make mistakes and messes, and women kind of have to clean that up.
Yeah, and they had that liberty and they used it and it got them all killed, whereas it didn't for Tess. It was funny because when a couple nights ago I was got kind of drunk and was having a few cigarettes out on the outside the front door. Yeah. And this freshman girl came up to me. And she was drunk, and apparently like her friends, like her story didn't make sense, but like her friends had like dropped her off, and like she was trying to walk up the hill and she fell and dropped her phone. And I was like, okay, well, I can call you an Uber and everything. Like, you're obviously freezing. You want to come inside, and like, I'll give you a glass of water. I'll give you like jacket and everything. It'll be all chill. But it was very funny kind of seeing Bill Skarsgård doing that exact same thing. It's like, look, I understand that literally this entire situation is not great. So I'm trying to be as, hey, everything's good. Everything is kosher here.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it was very funny seeing that, you know, replayed again, because I forgot that's how his character even was. And you see people online a lot now these days being like, oh, you got to like tiptoe around women in these situations like this. Like, no, I mean, you don't have to be an awkward weirdo about it, but it's also not that hard to be like, you know, do literally just like the minutest thing, being like, look, if you want, or like we can step outside, or like I can
do
whatever.
Self-awareness.
Yeah, literally just some form of self-awareness, which it seems like the men in this movie do not have.
Yeah.
Outside of his conversation with Tess.
Yeah, I think Keith is definitely like he's on the cusp of getting it, but he still does stupid things.
Yeah.
What it reminds me of is like the negligence of like masculine negligence, if that's kind of what we're talking about. I was thinking of like AJ's introduction. Obviously, he gets Me Too'd and everything. He flies out to Detroit to assess the Airbnb, which he owns. Mm-hmm. Right. And, you can own the Airbnb, but you can't own the freaking history of, what's going on underneath there. But he owns the Airbnb and, thinks that entitles him to everything in the Airbnb, including the secret passageway and like the rape room and everything. And he starts measuring it out with his. He's really good at
square footage.
He's really good at using a measuring tape, by the way. Like I have never been that good at using a measuring tape. He probably has experience doing it.
Yeah, you get the sense that he does this a lot.
He probably he has to liquidate property all the time. Which I also love that they're like in a neighborhood that is like. That is a future Airbnb neighborhood. Like, like someone's going to come in and buy all those houses and make them rentals. Like,
oh, yeah.
I love this white flight kind of theme that's going on. But again, you have this like intersection of masculine negligence and capital and white flight and all this stuff. There's all sorts of things going on in Barbarian that are reflective of like our modern society and the past that we're coming out of. What's it going toward? Like, what's the crux of all that?
It's leaving room if it wants to become a creature feature, which it does.
It does,
that it can do that. And, like we both kind of criticized Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard earlier this month with Cabin in the Woods for like having the cake, eating it too, wanting to play with all these tropes. But we agreed that Cabin in the Woods just doesn't play them straight in an interesting way. And to me, Barbarian, like it still always does. When it wants to be a creature feature, it is an effective creature feature. The way that Zach Cregger directs any scene with like legitimate anxiety, like it works. He is good at this. Whereas like I think the Descent restrains itself from doing the same thing where Barbarian kind of shows off its creature. Like those creatures are creating chaos, hiding in the dark.
Yeah.
You got to cut around them in order to feel disoriented. And it's also waiting 50 minutes. I mean, it's got audacity to make you wait for these creatures to show up to begin with.
It's like 60% of the movie before they finally even show up.
And we should say, if we're talking so much about men and Barbarian, there's only one man and
he's out.
And he's out at the beginning. He gets a pipe through his face. And then it's an all-female cast, which is really rare in horror.
Mm-hmm. I could not actually name another movie except for House, I guess, that has an all-female cast like that.
House, yeah.
But yeah, no, it is very rare. You're right.
It is super rare, yeah. So there's no men in the cave with them. I mean, except for the crawlers, which are not androgynous. I mean, there are male crawlers. There's a female crawler we see at one point. There's a child crawler. So like there is like this family unit tribe thing going on down there. And then the cave itself is, there's all kinds of symbolism with the cave. Aaron, you said earlier, talking about like in the Inferno, like it's a descent into hell. It can be reminiscent of a womb. It can be reminiscent of...
I was wondering when the vagina cave was going to come
The
up.
vagina cave, you have to talk about it because I do think it's relevant to some extent because motherhood is a prominent theme in the Descent. But it could also be a digestive tract, like it can be something that chews you up and spits you out. So there's all kinds of that imagery going on too. And I don't think any of those contradict each other.
No.
I think they overlap in meaningful ways. I think, and going back to Barbarian, my issue is, are these things overlapping in meaningful ways, or do they just happen to be ideas and themes that are contemporary that we can all kind of point to and be like, oh, I recognize that? Is it almost like a Marvel version of like seeing, a cameo? There's Stan Lee. Is it like, oh, I know gentrification. I know about the 80s and nostalgia. Or is it like actually kind of coming together towards something?
If I had been the one that checked in first and you showed up late at night.
What, you wouldn't have let me in?
Hell no, I wouldn't have let you in. Do you think I'm crazy? But if I was dumb enough to let you in, you wouldn't even think twice. You would just march on in.
Wait, you just marched on in?
Yeah, because I had to. And it was scary.
What? Do I look like some kind of monster?
Not my point.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
So it is very funny to me in Barbarian that it's obvious that Justin Long is a sex pest. Probably Harvey Weinstein to this woman. He not only uses a lot of abrasive misogynistic language, frequently calling her a f***ing bitch, like all over and over again. Also uses some homophobic language, like hangs up on his mother before she can even finish saying I love you. But then when he discovers the father, he's like, he berates him over everything. And it kind of made me wonder, because like obviously like earlier on, like when he gets drunk at the bar and then he calls the woman that he raped, you kind of going what you were saying, like is it kind of contemporary stuff, or is it leading to something like this idea of like men who do wrong or do evil, but because of how they were raised or how society has allowed them to act, they don't realize that they're wrong or evil, or they think that theirs is not as bad because they didn't do as much. And I don't know, I was just kind of curious your guys' thoughts on him being like, oh, hi pot, this is Kettle, whenever he berates the father.
Well, yeah,
for finding everything.
I think because Barbarian is so segmented, you also get like the 3 degrees of these guys, right? Where you get like Keith is the nice guy. He still is like being insensitive in ways that he doesn't realize while acknowledging it, but he's still doing it.
Like microaggressions.
Yeah, microaggressions. Then you have Justin Long, who's like a rapist, who says that, I did sleep with that girl, but she needed a little bit of convincing.
Yeah, and you can tell that he thinks that like it's a gray situation.
Right. Yeah, he really thinks that. And then you have Frank, who's a barbarian. I mean, he's like legitimately a monster. He'll
Openly.
go pretend to be like a
He's literally the Joseph Fritzl of 8 Mile.
Yeah. I mean, he's like you have these degrees, and I think they're done that way on purpose. But what the movie kind of posits is that like, they're all guilty, basically. They all end up dead. None of them make it through. Even the guy who says she's never been in my house in 15 years. Like, he's talking down to Tess because she's the one who asks if it's safe, and it's not, because he's living there like he is safe, and he's not. And he knows it, but he still dies. Like, I do think that there is intentionality, and the way that Barbarian is tiered and segmented really draws attention to it.
I want to talk about the climax real quick, because you're talking about all these guys and like the natural consequence of their transgressions is that they die. The mother at the end of this movie, there is a moment where Tess is on the ground and she has a gun pointed at the mother's face, and she gets to choose to pull that trigger or spare the mother. And she kills the mother. She puts her, arguably out of her misery. Mm-hmm. And then the movie ends. That's the ending of the movie.
Yeah, cut to black on the gunshot.
Yes,
couple clips during the credits. But
what do you make of that? What is that?
To me, that is like, if you're talking about motherhood and making hard decisions, like, yeah, I mean, like the mother is still like, she's. What she represents is that she is a result of this like sexual trauma, courtesy of Frank, right. And she wants to take Tess back into the barbarian basement, and continue to live in the wake of that trauma. And to me, it's like, it's kind of like Tess being like, we can't, like, I can't do this.
We can't go back.
Yeah, and you, like, the mother, she's, they call her the mother. She's a creature, She's
humanized in a lot of ways.
She represents something, and she represents something that, Tess...
Is she just a symbol then, and not so much a being in your eyes?
She's a creature. It's a creature feature. They're showing her off.
Yeah, you can't just dismiss her personhood because she's a creature, because she's a product of incest. Like, is there some... Are they... I like what you were saying. I like that you're saying that we can't go back. That trauma has to end.
She literally says it. She says, I can't go back there. Like,
I can't go back there. Maybe you can, mother, but she could have shot her.
The mother won't go without her.
Maybe she could have, shot her in the leg or something. I don't know. No, you're probably right. I don't think, if I were in the similar situation, would I shoot the mother? Probably, because I'd be so scared. But like, is it just saying that like she's so scary and so powerful that you just have to kill your demons? And you're not going to go... I guess the Descent kind of says something similar. I mean...
The Descent basically lets the demons kill you, If
you don't kill them, they will kill you.
Yeah, and you can kill a whole family of them, they'll still kill you. or like, you're never free of them. I mean, there's two endings to the Descent,
Yeah.
you know, where neither of them are like happy endings. They're basically the same ending, but one of them's a little bit more overt. One definitely leans more into the trauma angle of it as well.
Yeah, we get to the ending of the Descent, and it's Juno and Sarah in their last like face off with the crawlers, and you have like this really, I would say, badass moment. Aaron, would you agree? A badass moment where they wreck a whole team of these guys.
Yeah, they like mess like a whole bunch of them up. Just like absolutely destroy them, and then
They eye gouge one of them, and there's
yeah.
also eye gouging in Barbarian.
Yeah, and then but yeah, with the Descent, like there's this like reveal about something that had happened earlier in the movie, but basically Sarah's like, I know everything about you. That's basically happened. Puts a climbing pick through her knee.
Yeah. Sarah
And
finds out that Juno has like cheated on Sarah. Like
not only does she find out that Juno had been having an affair with Sarah's husband before he died, but also that she left her friend Beth to bleed out and die and lied to everybody.
After she friendly fired Beth, and AJ friendly fires Tess in Barbarian. Look at that. Eye gouging, friendly fire abound. But no,
and Juno also led like the group into this uncharted cave.
Yeah, that she knew was uncharted. They like put in, I think they call it like a flight report or something for like a completely different cave.
Yeah.
Right. So nobody could even like come to the right cave to rescue them if they didn't show up.
Right. So Sarah's big decision is that she, like how Tess shoots the mother, Sarah's big decision is I'm going to, basically cripple you and leave you to die from the crawlers, Juno, because you slept with my husband, you macked on my husband, you killed my best friend, and you let us down here, you stupid B word.
Good save.
And then the film, the ending of the film, which is up for, depending on which release, she either gets out of the cave and runs to her car. She grabs a hold of that thing, and it's funny, after being in the cave for so long, like the effect of being in that cave is so disorienting and alienating that when she grabs a hold of that car, for me it's like that car does not, like, that doesn't feel like a real object. Like it's completely foreign. It's like a spaceship. And then she gets in her car, books it down the road, and then finally stops to like throw up basically. And you're watching this movie and you're like, where do you go from there? What is your next step? Like, for me, I'm wondering, did Tess get the job? But for Sarah, I'm like, how do you even explain this to a therapist? How do you explain this to all these girls' parents and everything? And then you find out that, well, maybe she is actually still in the cave.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, they made like a really crappy lower budget sequel. So unfortunately, the American one is quote unquote canon, and there is kind of like an explanation for some of what happens. But yeah, I really prefer the original British ending because a lot of people will say that it feels sadder because it ends with her like she when like she sees this ghostly vision of Juno in the car, she freaks out, her eyes open up. And then that's where the American one ends. And then the British one, the original one, when her eyes open up, she's back in the cave, basically in this part of this hole that she had fallen into right before she gets out of the cave. And you find out that light that she had seen before, like they mentioned earlier in the movie, this kind of like fake light that makes you think it's sunlight, but it's actually like light from the rocks.
It's like phosphorescence.
Yeah. But you see her and you can hear the creatures getting closer in the background, but she sees a vision of her daughter with like a birthday cake. And just as like the camera starts to zoom out, she kind of slowly starts to smile. And I don't want to say I think it's a happier ending, but I believe it was a video from this guy I watch on YouTube, Ryan Hollinger. He did a video about the Descent a few years ago, and he said, and this really kind of shaped my perspective and why I ended up liking the original version better. Is like it feels like the British one feels like she has, despite everything that's happened, maybe like the last handful of minutes didn't potentially happen, but, she has kind of, accepted her trauma.
Yeah.
And she is content with what's going to potentially happen to her. And that's perfectly fine with her because, she's, going to see her daughter again, XYZ. Whereas the American one feels like she's still running away and she hasn't really actually properly accepted or handled anything.
Yeah, it definitely, like, you say it's not a happier ending. It feels like a more peaceful to be like, kind of accepting of your fate.
Yeah.
And I do also prefer the UK version as well. And the first time I watched it, I didn't watch that version.
Yeah, I made sure to tell you.
Yeah, you
watched
did.
it.
Yeah, and Tristan, that's the version you did watch.
I did watch, yeah, true.
Just to go back to the ending of Barbarian. So I see where you're talking about like the whole like I can't go back side of it. I can see where some people go, maybe she's being sympathetic and she's like, I can't let you live this life either. Bang. Part of me also wonders if maybe like one of the notes that I wrote earlier on is like you kind of see, how these people's traumas have like influenced what they've done. Like we don't know what necessarily happened to Keith, but he has night terrors and he's maybe a little too like overly nice. We see Justin Long's character, maybe something happened to him to cause him to be a piece of shit sex pest.
His dad hates him. He has a rocky relationship with his dad.
And then obviously like the mother, like she, she's like the she's being motherly, but also if anybody freaks out, she just goes nuts and violent on him. Not to get too in depth about my own upbringing and childhood. I'm not, unfamiliar with some stuff like that. Yeah. And so it feels like she has kind of embodied some of the, abuse that has been done onto her that she does, inadvertently to other people. It makes me wonder if maybe part of this is also Tess just being like, these shitty situations have happened to her that maybe she's just also bound to perpetuate these violent tendencies brought from these traumas. Maybe I'm just reading a little too into it. I did not think of it the first time. I actually only crossed my mind when I rewatched it.
Yeah.
So I was just curious if maybe that was something.
That's a good interpretation. Although it does beg the question then.
Maybe just like touches on it maybe, but like maybe not the full-fledged intent.
I think it begs the question then, what does Tess do with her trauma now that she's experienced all of what she's experienced in Barbarian? Does she perpetuate that trauma, and should someone put her down? I mean, well, really, there's something there.
Well, I mean, she's gonna be part of like a documentary crew. I don't know. Maybe she like Christian Bale's people. She's just screaming at him.
Yeah, she'll be afraid to go in basements for a while for sure.
Understandable. I was afraid to go in basements after I saw the Barbarian.
And here we are recording in mine.
Yeah,
beautiful turn of events.
Cold ass floors.
Come on, Rebecca. I didn't know this was gonna happen. This is exactly what we believe in. We've always said if there's no risk, what's the point?
Well, don't try and justify this. Where are we?
It hasn't got a name. It's a new system. I wanted us all to discover it. No one's ever been down here before.
Kidding.
Let's go ahead and turn show to the questions now. Aaron, why don't you go first and kick us off?
Okay. So you guys are you're going camping this weekend, right?
We are going camping,
which I'm sure is pretty freaky considering having just watched The Descent. But what's the most dangerous recreational activity you have done or would consider doing?
The most dangerous one that I've done is I have been reckless on an ATV a couple times, and I got into an ATV wreck when I was in high school.
Ooh, damn.
Yeah, and it rolled over me. I'm very lucky that I wasn't severely injured, and I will not get back on an ATV because of that. Would do. I have a fascination with sharks. I would love to go shark cage diving, but I'll also be terrified to do it because I'm also scared of them.
Yeah, he's a shark guy. Go listen to Big Sharknado for all your shark fill on Hard Ticket. One thing I definitely used to do when I was in college and I would have alcohol is I would...
I know what you're going to say, man. Oh, my God.
What am I going to say?
Climbing the crane.
Oh, well, I was going to say a fire escape because the crane thing is super illegal and I don't want to be caught on a podcast talking about that. But I did climb my friend's fire escape one time after they had moved out of that apartment. And I hopefully there was nobody in there. They would have been very startled if I was tapping on their window at like 2 a.m. But yeah, I had a habit of climbing things. I still love climbing things. I just don't do it.
Jeff has prehensile toes, so he's an adept climber.
I can't,
it's like a monkey.
He can peel a banana with his feet.
I can peel a banana with my feet.
It's like his party trick.
Yeah. In terms of what I would do, I'm probably past the point where I'm going to do anything more reckless than I already have. Aaron, you've skydived.
Yeah. So my thing would either be, shooting ranges because I grew up like around guns. We had we probably had like I don't know, maybe 20 guns in my house, like a bunch of rifles, a bunch of shotguns, a bunch of pistols. So that always runs the risk of something bad happening. But yeah, I would say probably beyond that, skydiving. I would also do skydiving again because it's great. But yeah, it's funny that you said sharks because that's exactly what I was what I was thinking too.
Shark cage diving.
Yeah, I mean, I've joked in the past about like I am actually kind of serious about this. Whereas like whenever I die, like if you can't use my body for science, literally just like chum me up and use me to get like sharks for like shark tours.
Chum me up.
So like
Chum me up.
Yeah, so like I would go shark cave diving if I had the opportunity.
Nice.
We could do it together, man.
Oh yeah.
What's your favorite shark species?
Great white. I'm basic.
Dude, I'm the same.
Oh really? You're not like a tiger shark? We're
Makos are
getting
cool,
off
too.
topic.
Big tiger shark.
Yeah, Makos are pretty dope too.
Makos are awesome. My next question is there a Skarsgård you wouldn't share an Airbnb with? Because this is Bill Skarsgård. I'm assuming you guys would share the Airbnb with him, right?
You know, one of the nicest celebrity lookalikes I've been compared to is Bill Skarsgård.
I was going to say that because the first time I watched Barbarian, and I also wrote it in my notes, I was looking at him, I was like, why does he remind me of Bacchus?
Oh,
there's a little bit of an eye thing there. I think you're right. Yeah,
he's a handsome man. I'll take it. Yeah. And so we'd live it up at an Airbnb. He'd be my first Skarsgård. Stellan, a little creepy.
Oh,
but he can definitely pull off a monologue, so he's invited.
Watch Andor.
And then Alex, I don't know. Alex, I'm kind of on the fence about. What about you guys?
So I actually have written out for all of them. I feel like Stellan, you would be an interesting guy to learn from. You could have some interesting conversations, so I'm cool with him. Bill would be fun. Alexander, he's kind of a freak, and he's also hot, so I think you could probably like maybe get down and dirty with him. Walter Skarsgård. I mean,
who is this?
He's also one of the brothers. He's primarily in Sweden.
He's like the Liam Hemsworth of.
I think we could get around. I think we could like find some stuff to connect with. Both of us being 30, but then there's Gustav Skarsgård.
You're making these up.
He's like the second oldest one. He looks like if you asked one of the Skarsgårds to cosplay as Ralph Fiennes, and it just unnerves me slightly.
Oh my god!
So I'd probably have to say Gustav Skarsgård.
I think I'm gonna put the zinger dinger on you.
Dude, that's awesome. You did your research on that one.
Because if it's Bill, Stellan, and Alexander, then they're all cool. So I guess I got to go with one of the other ones.
Gustav and Walter.
Yeah, they're like the Baldwins.
Damn, yeah. They
the
keep coming out with
Baldwin
these
royal family.
Skarsgård.
What about you?
I would definitely stay with all the Skarsgårds, but I would definitely want to stay the most with Stellan Skarsgård.
I knew it. Big Andor guy.
A big Andor guy. Mamma Mia, of course.
You know me.
You know me. I love Stellan Skarsgård. He's like one of my favorite actors, like living right now. So him or Oscar Isaac, I would take either.
Nice. Both Star Wars veterans.
Just spend the night asking him about what it was like filming on Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on. I'm going to skip ahead to one of my middle question here. So the Descent taps into primal fear of like horror in the caverns, Barbarian to horror lurking in the basement and even an old neighborhood. Jaws kept fearful audiences out of the ocean. Final Destination 2 encourages us to shift lanes out from behind log trucks. So has a horror movie ever changed your behavior by making you afraid of something you might have otherwise been completely nonplussed by?
It is funny that you put Final Destination 2 because that is probably like the big thing.
The log truck?
Yeah. Weirdly, I was kind of actually struggling to think of something. Like I'm already, kind of an arachnophobic, but I mentioned before we recorded Texas Chainsaw, the movie Infested, because that director's doing one of the upcoming Evil Dead movies. That movie for literal months had me like checking the corners every time I was in the living room, every time I like opened the closet to get to the washing machine. I guess the closest thing I could think of was, I don't know, Eden Lake made me feel a little more wary of teenagers.
Yeah.
but I don't know. I can't really think of anything, to be completely honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But definitely Final Destination 2, if nothing else. But like I said, you already mentioned that.
Right, yeah.
Everybody freaks out over that now.
Like I wouldn't swim in. I'll barely swim in like rivers or lakes because of Jaws. But to give you an answer that doesn't really like back directly to your question, I have never played a game of Ouija. I've never done a Ouija board.
Yeah.
And I never would. And not because I don't believe in the supernatural, but like I've just seen too many horror films. And what if?
Nah, I'm the exact same way. Damn, I should have said that.
Yeah, stay away from those. My mom always told me, don't touch a Ouija board.
And you can combine the two fears of mine with Ouija Shark, which is an actual movie.
We got to stop mentioning that on our podcast.
That's our second time mentioning
and
Ouija
that's
Shark.
too many. That's too many.
That's true.
Okay, back to you, Aaron.
Well, we kind of already touched on it, but I guess I'll just kind of ask it again just to kind of get a definitive answer. Wait, before I ask it, you have only seen the American ending. You did not see the...
I've seen the British ending like on YouTube, yeah.
Okay.
Did you watch it in prep?
I didn't watch it in prep for this, though. It's been a couple of years.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, like I said, because we already kind of touched on it, I guess we don't need to go too in-depth with it. But which do you think is the better ending?
Jeff, you prefer the British ending, right?
I definitely prefer the UK ending for sure. It definitely feels like it's more complete. It's more final. It doesn't do that thing where it like leaves room for a shitty sequel, which inevitably was going to happen anyway. And I like the little bit of camera trickery they do too, as the camera rotates to reveal that the cake wasn't there, and it just kind of gives you a little bit into Sarah's head. And it's like really the most we see her at peace in the entire movie. So I think it adds a hell of a lot.
Yeah, that's basically how I feel about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. And everybody prefers the British ending. Like online.
And you're
like,
a contrarian.
And I am a contrarian. And I liked the American ending. I didn't mind it. I thought that there was some ambiguity to it that I appreciated. And it also reminded me of the ending of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where they get away, but, what's the tagline for Texas Chainsaw Massacre? Who will survive and what
Something
will be
like
left
that.
of them?
Yeah.
I kind of felt like a similar sort of vibe with the end of the Descent. And I think Neil Marshall, he's like, I referenced, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Thing, Deliverance, all kinds of movies in the Descent. So I don't mind like a more ambiguous, like not quite so, like you were saying, like she's at peace at the end.
Yeah.
I'm fine with her maybe not getting that closure. She probably deserves it, though. She definitely deserves it.
I will say, I feel about the American ending the same way I kind of feel about when Michael Haneke redid Funny Games, is basically like shot for shot, but in English, which is, if you didn't know about the original, this is good.
Yeah.
But if you are aware of it, or if you've seen the original, then there's just something lacking there that it doesn't hit anymore. But yeah, like if it does work really well as an ending in itself. I just think that because I know that there's the original one, I think the original one just adds so much more.
Yeah, it's like watching the new How to Train Your Dragon and thinking like, this would be a great animated movie.
Or like the Gus Van Sant Psycho. That's like a shot-for-shot remake of Hitchcock's.
Oh, God. Yeah.
All right, my next question. What's an alternate ending you could envision for Barbarian?
So I wrote this kind of haphazardly, but my alternate ending, if you wanted to be kind of like real dour about it, is that the father doesn't kill himself. We actually don't see him at all until the last bit of the movie, where the mother dies of her injuries from the fall.
Okay.
As she, helps Tess, and Tess is seriously injured or maybe unconscious, and we just see the dad come out from the house and drag an unconscious Tess back into the house to basically just restart this all over again.
He's like 100 years old.
Yeah. I mean, well,
he puts her on like a skateboard or something.
Yeah, it's like a wagon. Yeah.
Well, no, this is Detroit. He'd be on like a bicycle or something.
Oh, right. Yeah. What was I thinking?
Yeah, just basically in my mind, kind of like repeating the cycle of abuse again. Tess, she'd have been let down by a man that she thought she could trust in AJ before it finds out that he's a piece of shit too.
Right.
And obviously like the police not investigating. So you have that, this also a perpetuation of this idea that like men / law enforcement / fathers, being, these things that are supposed to be protectors, but things that actually tend to have the ability to do and oftentimes do cause more harm than what they should. If you want to get like real dour with it, like maybe like leave hints about there being the father, or like the father used to be there, but you don't know he's alive until like the very end.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, really any other alternative ending I feel like is going to be a downer, because it like ends on her surviving and it ends right there. Two things you could do. You could do the original Get Out ending and have the cops show up and arrest her because she's the sole survivor. And they're like, there's nobody here to like, validate your story.
They see like the dead body of like a weird, creepy monster. And they're just like, Well, that's an innocent person, right? Like the cops are just like, yeah.
These cops
You're
would
that
do
crackhead
that.
from earlier, because that's what they say to her like earlier. So,
Right, yeah. Or another creature comes out of the basement in an even deeper level because it goes even deeper than you thought it did. And it
Satan himself comes out.
Yeah, it just keeps going.
He's like, leave me a 5-star review on Airbnb.
Yeah, I think that's my direction.
I like that.
Okay. So my original first question here. This is kind of like the how many 8-year-olds could you take in a fight question, but how many crawlers do you think the mother could take before she's overpowered?
It's gonna be like C-3PO in Return of the Jedi. It's an Ewok situation. They are gonna worship the mother. There's not gonna be any fighting.
But she's probably gonna attack them, right?
No. She's gonna baby them. She's going to put them all in a little hole.
Oh my God, it's perfect. Wow, yeah. She just becomes like the queen crawler.
Yeah, 2 traumas make a right. That's what they always say.
Yeah. What do you think, Aaron?
I wrote probably 3 if they're if they're coming at her all at once. But if this is like a Mortal Kombat style thing where it's one at a time, she probably takes them all out.
Yeah, she could. I mean, like by the end, Sarah's taking them out.
She'll turn into like the Shao Kahn of trauma.
I think she could take at least like a couple dozen before she starts slowing down. Dude, she's relentless. She falls from that water tower. She's fine.
Yeah.
Anyway, final questions.
Okay. Would you trust your significant other with Juno during a vacation?
Would I trust my bisexual girlfriend
with like the hottest member of the group who's like athletic and can like bend like a gymnast and all this other stuff?
Yeah, I think I would, because you know what? I can't bend like a gymnast, and she thinks I'm hot.
There's hope for anybody. Yeah, I trust my bisexual girlfriend too.
Okay. I'm single. I've been for the last couple years, so I can't say. But
I wouldn't trust you.
Theoretically, if you had a bisexual girlfriend.
Theoretically, if I had a bisexual girlfriend. Honestly, yeah. Just because my ex and I kind of had conversations about stuff like that. And we're like, no, I don't think we would want anybody else getting involved. So I feel like I could trust her.
That's awesome.
That's good. Look at us. We're all really trustworthy guys.
We're all really secure in our masculinity. We're not.
But I'm single, so if Juno's there, then if she wants, if she wants me, I'm down to clown.
All right. All right. My last question. What changes about the Descent if you gender flip the cast?
It's louder for sure. Okay. Everybody's farting.
Everybody's peeing on stuff.
Yeah, they're just peeing anywhere. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's as interesting.
They're like, did you see the game last week? That's what they say to each other.
I don't know. It's just like, yeah, it just fundamentally isn't as interesting of a movie.
Why is
you're
that?
losing a lot of thematics, you know, especially like if you look at the cave, like it's some sort of like idea of the body, you know, that
you can say birth canal, dude.
You said esophagus.
Well, I say it could be a digestive tract. It could be it can be interpreted in many different ways.
Yeah.
Gateway to hell.
Yeah, it could. I guess. I don't know. I just don't think it's that interesting. I don't know. What do you think?
So
he's got notes.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I want to sound somewhat smart. But no joke. And it's funny because you were asking me before, we solidified this episode, what could potentially be a replacement for Barbarian. And we both said The Ritual. And I wrote, no joke, you'd probably get The Ritual. It's probably what you'd get. Like, instead, it's more about, like, personal struggles and moral failings rather than necessarily, like, entirely about grief and loss. I also, specifically, I also think, given the way the stories are told versus how people kind of talk about men, the way people kind of joke about men being like, oh, you can, like, hate each other, but then you, like, you talk about the game or you share a beer or just one interest and suddenly you're best friends. I feel like instead of having that nailing a Juno character in the knee and leaving her in the cave, you'd probably have someone doing like some kind of stereotypical like noble sacrifice so that way the other one could kind of get out
themselves. That makes
right.
sense.
Yeah. The male fantasy of being that protector.
Yeah. Being the person who dies.
I think you'd probably get something like that.
Yeah.
I like that, Aaron. That is smart.
Yeah,
if the ritual sounded that way without your notes.
Well,
if the Ritual was underground, yeah, it would be pretty much the Descent with the gender swap cast. I like that. That's a good point.
I gotta watch The Ritual.
It's good.
It is. It's pretty good.
It would
awesome
make a
creature design. Holy shit.
Yeah, I wish they showed more of it again. But Anyway, my last question is, if we were to have a remake of one of these two movies in the style of a Tim Burton stop-motion animated Gothic designed movie, which one are we going with?
I'm going with The Descent.
Okay.
The crawlers, they kind of already look like naked Jack Skellingtons. If you like goblin versions of Jack Skellington.
Welcome to Crawler Town. Welcome to Crawler.
Yeah, it's a dark and dreary movie with a British cast, and I think with some of Burton's stuff that involves kind of dark, dreary Gothic, maybe a little bit of British. I just feel like this would feel. I think it would really hit that kind of Gothic and just kind of spiritually British kind of vibe. Plus, I imagine if Danny Elfman is involved, he could probably whip up a pretty good song sequence about watching her husband getting a pipe through the head.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
Yeah. That'd be, I don't know if they would. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That'd be great. What do you think?
I think I want to see Barbarian tackled by Tim Burton, because there's already a little bit of skewering of suburbia in Edward Scissorhands. And I don't know why, but there's this shot that I can't get out of my head. And it's like an ant farm shot, but it's not actually an ant farm. It's just a cross section of the house with the tunnels underneath, and they're all running around like they're in a Pac-Man game kind of thing. And I know that's not Tim Burton at all, but I'm just I can just see Tim Burton doing something kind of weird with it.
Just imagine Justin Long's character being like Beetlejuice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I when I first asked this question, I thought I was leaning towards Barbarian, but I think just based on the color palettes alone, The Descent makes a stronger argument. Yeah, it's 2 against 1.
Democracy manifest.
Yeah, we're getting The Descent.
You want to take over this podcast, Aaron? We've reached the end of Hard Ticket.
One day, maybe I will add a sound effect, but I can't when you keep doing it yourself.
Yeah, we've reached the end of Hard Ticket, and which means that we are at our last question, the only question that actually matters, which is, gentlemen, what does your Hard Ticket go to? Aaron, we'll start with you.
So, here's the thing. I love The Descent. I really enjoy Barbarian. But my approach to this is, if I had the chance to see one in theaters, which one would I take if I hadn't seen it in theaters? And I've seen Barbarian in theaters. I have not seen The Descent in theaters, even though I've watched it a bunch of times. I recently did the Star Wars prequels because I hadn't actually seen them when they were in theaters. So I'd go with The Descent. For the simple fact that like I said, I've not seen it in theaters.
That's a really good way of putting it. Yeah, I think it's really cool that you got to watch audience reactions to that switch in Barbarian when you were working at the theater.
Yeah, I did it with that. I did it with if you saw Warfare with the IED scene. There are times if I've seen a movie in advance, I will absolutely be where in the runtime is it, and just go watch, and it's so fun.
Yeah.
And so I think that also helps to okay, I've seen how people react to that. I'm curious to see how people would react to some of the stuff in The Descent.
It's the little things, I have a bit of a confession to make to you guys. I have not been able to get into The Descent. I haven't been able to just be won over by it. And I know it's going to happen eventually. It's going to be my Inside Llewyn Davis.
That's my The Descent. No, I love Inside Llewyn Davis. I gave it a 4 stars last time I watched it. I'm now in.
You're there.
I'm in. Oscar Isaac, baby.
I'm glad that I know that that's how it's pronounced, because I always thought it was it feels like it should be pronounced Llewellyn, but it's not spelled that way.
No.
Right.
And I haven't seen the movie. So.
Right, yeah.
So
really
thank you for clarifying that.
It took me 4 times to really love it, but just watch it.
Yeah, and maybe it'll take
You'll
me 3 or 4.
definitely be won over on The Descent if you watch that sequel.
They'll be like, oh, yes, yeah, anything compared to this. No, I mean, my Hard Ticket's going to go to Barbarian. I get a lot out of Barbarian. I do think that it's it's a bit of a playground, but I also think it's kind of it's almost in the broader context of horror, just kind of wiping the slate clean and being like, hey, guys, we can have fun with this and also play it straight, and we can make a really good story out of it in a way that, maybe horror hasn't done in a long time. And I think we're seeing it now, where horror is at this place where it's not afraid to be funny. It's not afraid to be like ridiculous and take risks. And I think Barbarian takes a lot of credit for that, and Zach Cregger's work in general. And I get a lot of the suburban horror as well. It's definitely prominent in Weapons where there's something happening just right under everybody's nose. But in Barbarian too, like Barbarian just taps into, for me, something that is like so primal to the idea of the boogeyman, not as like a character, but just as this like foreboding, ominous underscore of like suburban life. And I think Barbarian does it masterfully.
I think, I agree with you in a lot of ways. I think we're on the verge of horror renaissance, and it's being pioneered by people like Zach Cregger. He's like the new Ari Aster, the new Robert Eggers. Wait, Cregger and Eggers? What the hell? How did this happen? So I agree with you. And you're right. It's a playground, which is what horror really needs right now, because it does feel like it was maybe taking itself a little too seriously for the past kind of 10-ish years. And, you know, we had our Cabin in the Woods episode where we're talking, like, where do we go? Like, Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard deconstructed all these tropes, but, like, where do we go from there? Is it just going to be the nihilistic, chaotic ending, or is there something more? And I think Cregger has unlocked a piece of that.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue to see what he puts out. Weapons was a big hit. You know, it was a huge hit. I know a lot of people who saw it, a lot of people who loved it, and I think he's going places. But my heart ticket goes to The Descent, and I do think that it's more, like I said, singular. I think it is prefiguring a trend in horror that we are kind of on the other side of now. But I think it got in kind of early and laid the groundwork for a lot of that stuff. For a lot of movies that I really like. I really love Hereditary. I love The Witch, stuff like that. So,
do you think The Descent does what those movies do better?
No, I don't. And like you, Jeff, I also had some issues. This is my third time seeing The Descent.
Uh-huh.
My first time or two seeing it, I was having a little bit of trouble getting into it. I didn't see what all the hype was about. You know, you have people like Aaron who really love this movie and who hype it up to hell and back. And I was just like, yeah, I like it. It's a good creature feature. Pretty good cast.
Yeah.
But now I do have, I think, a greater appreciation for it because of its context, because of its richness of theme, and because I actually appreciated the way it was made more at this time too, because it was just so it is of its time, and I kind of appreciate that. I like that.
I think the lesson here is that if you expose yourself to a movie enough times, you'll eventually develop a hostile appreciation for it.
It's a Stockholm Syndrome baby all the way.
Well, that's going to do it for us here at Hard Ticket. Aaron, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And that, you know, my ticket is still very hard, so I'm very appreciative of being here.
You should probably go see a doctor about that.
Yeah, it's been over an hour. It's
they say 4 hours.
Okay, yeah.
You got time.
We'll check in here in a couple, but go ahead and give us your plugs. Where can people follow you and listen to your podcast?
Yeah, so you can listen to the podcast that I co-host with Jeffrey Scott, who again was on last week's episode with you guys. We're Head on a Stick. You can find us on Twitter at Head on a Stick Pod, Instagram Head on a Stick Podcast, underscores between each of those. I believe we upload to Apple and Amazon, but we primarily just kind of pimp out Spotify. So, you know, like, comment, review, all that good stuff. And then I normally don't pimp out my Letterboxd, but you can find me on there too, at Aaron Radcliff. No E at the end of my name. Despite what my co-host always writes, there is no E in my last name.
And again, today, their Texas Chainsaw Massacre episode dropped where I am a guest, so you can give that a listen.
Our new longest episode beat out our Willy Wonka episode by like 15 minutes.
And it beat
over
out this
2
one.
hours.
Yeah, over 2 hours and 5 minutes of just 3 guys talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre in a basement.
Everyone loves
not one
hearing
of them.
3 white men talk for 2 hours. The most stimulating part of your day.
I hope so. You can follow our podcast at Hard Ticket Pod, all lowercase, all one word, on Instagram and Blue Sky. You can follow me on Letterboxd at Jeff Blogus, again, all lowercase, all one word. Tristan?
Yeah, you can follow me on Letterboxd at Tristan M. and you can follow me on Instagram at Tristan ____less.
Join us next week as we continue our Hard Ticket to Halloween with Evil Dead 2 and House. This is going to be a very fun conversation, and we're
Yes.
very excited. It's just us. We're ending our crossover, our Jimmy-Timmy Power Hour, but we were very happy to have you guys on board. So until next week, we will see you guys at the movies.
Bye.
It's a hard ticket at the movies. Which one will you watch? Let's decide.